and welcome everyone to Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. My name is Nina Joshi, and today we will be bringing on a very special guest, Joanne Watters, who is the Managing Director at IMC. As you know, on Women's Health Tech Wednesdays, we love questions. So if you have any for Joanne, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and I'll make sure that we get to it. So with that, would like to formally bring out our guest, Joanne. Thanks so much for being here today.
Hi, you're very welcome. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Perfect. So thank you so much again. Would love if you could, I think, kick things up, of course, at Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. The first question we have to ask is, what does women's health tech mean to you?
Well, that is a great question. What does that mean to me? So I have a strong personality, I think, growing up with five sisters and two brothers. And so being the youngest girl, I learned a lot from my older sisters. And with that, I had, I guess, a journey into innovation, which actually really sparked my interest. And that was brought on by one of my older sisters. And from there, I've been in technology ever since, and I have the bug for it. And being a woman just allows a different perspective, I find, in understanding how we can improve technology, how we can have digital technology, and just roundabout good old working hard relationships with colleagues and everyone else, I guess. I don't know. It's not something that I've really ever thought about, but it's important for women to definitely be put up there in the pedestal that we so deserve over time.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. And I know you had mentioned this a little bit earlier, kind of about how, these women in your life have, also inspired you with your career. Would love if you could tell us a little bit more about your career and about that journey into the healthcare industry, starting with just this idea of innovation and maybe how it, evolved into where you are right now.
Yeah, that's great. So I guess it started with, technology in my era was new, right? I guess just coming on and learning about what an internet and intranet was back in the day, that was really something I had couldn't turn a computer on, nothing like that. I had no idea. I was a stay-at-home mom at the time, raising two beautiful children, and I had an opportunity presented to myself from one of my sisters. And from there, I found it very fascinating. And it was just something I just felt this, oh my heavens, I have to learn more and more about this type of what is this? How does that happen? And so that started well over 30 years ago. And my the healthcare direction came about 15, 18 years ago. And I had no idea what I was getting into, but I just knew it was something very innovative. And I thought, wow, this is really something that I'm going to excel in. And I'm going to have a huge passion to help share this information with the world. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 18 years with health technologies. So it's pretty cool.
That's amazing. I mean, your curiosity and passion just shine through. So I think that's incredible that you were able to just take just basic curiosity and learning for something into a whole career. I think that is incredible. And so speaking about your current role right now, would love if you could share a little bit more about what you do at IMC and really what IMC is the company, kind of their mission to, impact healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. So IMC started out as a research and development company 20 years ago. We were very ahead of our time with the product line that we had selected to help combat medication non-adherence. Back then, they called it medication non-compliance. So I was brought on to the company to help diffuse that message of we were primarily in clinical research. So my role was to, and still is, to diffuse the message of how important it is to take medication as prescribed and the effects of medication non-adherence and how we can help solve that big gap and the big noise issue that has enormous effect on clinical trials and drug efficacy. So
Mm.
my role is to, I'm typically the first person of contact when researchers will, they hear about some of these innovative solutions and they want to learn more. So they'll come and ask me certain questions and I'll help them walk through the process of what it is we do and the benefits of that technology and how it impacts their research.
Wow, that's incredible. And I would say the name more or less can be the definition with medication adherence, but would love if you could share, is there like a specific definition or, so just so that we all have the same language, what exactly is medication adherence and why is that so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think of we're human, obviously. So every human has this wish list that they're going to be the perfect human, right? And so when it comes to medication, there's a reason why a physician will actually say, Joanne, you're supposed to take this once a day. And this is the reason why you need to take it. So if I don't take it, I will have perhaps some side effects and I won't feel any better, right? So
Mhm.
medication non-adherence has many definitions in like the research world. Some people call it, if you take it within a treatment window, you're compliant. If you finish the therapy, you're compliant. For chronic conditions like a hypertension, you need to keep taking that medicine your entire life. And for that reason, they have what's called persistence. And persistence is another form of non-adherence because you're not taking it
Mm.
every day consistently and persistently. So
Mhm.
non-adherence has a huge, it's a lot of different definitions, but in the end, did you take your medication or not?
Can I ask you a question about that? So is it if you took medication, but like in a different window or not in a specific way that's also considered medication, not adherence, even though you technically did, that's okay. Good to
Yeah,
know.
yeah, because if you think of it, right, so a drug has you have to have a certain level of the drug in your body, right?
Mhm.
So in order for that to get into your body, it has to have this little window of consistency. So if you, as an example, you take a pill a day and I say, oh, I take it when I go to bed at night. I don't know about you, but I don't go to bed every night at the same time,
Yeah. Mhm.
right? So it is important. It's called that therapeutic window, and you really should take it when regularly for sure. That way it's in your system as it should be. So yeah, it's like an early morning coffee. When you have caffeine withdrawals, you're like, oh,
Yep,
similar,
absolutely.
similar, similar.
That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. And I know, we were talking about how, from a patient perspective, medication, not adherence, and how that can, there's side effects that can kind of come into play by doing things like that. So I think that, the work that's being done really makes sense also from a patient perspective, but from a provider perspective, what is the motivation or what have you seen kind of their interest be when it comes to medication on not adherence?
Yeah, so we have, for the last 20 years, been in clinical research and drug development primarily,
Mm.
not necessarily the consumer side. But yes, specialty pharmacy is something as well. So, from the provider of a pharmacy, as an example, you are, a patient comes back to the pharmacy and says, I took these pills, but I still don't feel well. So, what's going to happen then is, first of all, the patient still doesn't feel well after, some trial and error. They come
Mhm.
back to the physician, and the physician is assuming they took their pills properly. Okay. So now the physician is like, well, okay, so if that drug didn't work for you, maybe we'll increase the dose strength and give you a stronger dose. Right.
Mm.
So there's
Mhm.
that aspect of it. So it puts a little bit of an onus on the pharmacy, the dispensing pharmacist, to say, well, they're not taking that. So that drug, 10 milligrams isn't doing it. So I have to up it. Or if they come back and that brand wasn't maybe the one they wanted, they flip to another brand. So it creates a little bit of, back and forth, and in the end, for the patient, it's not good. But for
Mhm.
the provider, again, they keep coming back into the pharmacy, and the pharmacist is seeing that they need to do a little bit more of a trial and error.
Mm.
Whereas if they could have come back and shown them a historical, a retrospective calendar, let's say, electronically, And it shows that I really was taking them, but then on the weekends, I wasn't taking them because it was the weekend.
Mhm.
At that point, you're going to bring a closer gap of a relationship and engagement between the pharmacist as well as the patient. So it actually is an opportunity for the pharmacist to educate the patient, and that actually empowers the pharmacist, right? They're like, oh heavens, this is why it's not working. Oh, listen, if you just take it, Joanne, just try again. Don't
Mhm.
skip on the weekends, and then come on back and let me know how you're doing. It really makes it like I almost have goosebumps. You almost feel like, wow, you really care about me, you know? So
Absolutely.
it's that aspect from the provider, but also affects the patient.
Absolutely. And I love that, I think in general, when it comes to these type of situations, not only that you had kind of mentioned just reducing the gap so that care isn't being delayed, but I think I love that you also brought up the communication aspect of it as well, and how that is so important when it comes to healthcare decision making. And those lines of communications need to be open with transparency and honesty. So I love that that solution is kind of bringing those things together.
Yep. Yeah,
Love that.
absolutely.
You had mentioned a little bit about, a lot of the work that you have done kind of within more of the clinical trial space. So curious, when it comes to your solution and the data that's being captured just by all of this, inputted information, once the data is gathered, who gets it and how do you ensure that the data is used and beneficial to these clinical teams?
Yeah, that's great. So a little bit about what makes us different as a provider, and we are a software as a service company
Mhm.
platform, but we also what our unique and sweet spot is our patented technologies that actually can track medication at a package level or a bottle level.
Hmm.
So those are what we call a printed sensor, or some type of sensor that's either going to, so as an example, for a pill bottle, you open the pill bottle, it'll detect when it is opened and it'll record that in date and time. You don't, as a patient, you don't have to say, I wrote it down and this is when I did it. It does it all for you, right? So it takes away that feeling of, oh my gosh, I have to write down every time I take a pill. You don't. So in clinical research, they have other things to worry about. They have other things as patients to do. So we make
Mhm.
it as simple as possible. So a simple pill bottle that can track openings, but as well, we have unit dose blister packaging that can also track at the dose level, which if you are a drug sponsor and you're trying to determine the efficacy of a new drug that's being developed, yes, an opening is a good thing, right? But also, if you can get it down to literally a per pill level and know if I took the morning dose before the evening dose, because that's that important. This is very, very critical information for the drug sponsor, right?
Mhm.
And as well for the care team, right? So we're back to, did the patient take the medicine and did they take the right pill at the right time? So you have all this data, it's happening in real time. So if I take out my pill at 10:03 in the morning, it just stays there. It's not like any bells or whistles fly off. It sits there. You don't even know it happened.
Mhm.
The next cool thing is, how do you communicate that data? And that's de-identified data, by the way, Nina. There's no link to knowing that is Joanne's pills that I'm taking. It's a string of digits, so it's de-identified and it's very secure.
Mhm.
The 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 next part is, who wants to see the data? When do they want to see the data, and how do they get that data?
Right.
So that involves, this is the communication and the relationship building that you do with sponsors and with pharmacy teams and care teams. So all of those have to take into account a lot of things, right? They have to take
Mhm.
into account the impact on the patient, like how burdensome is it? Is it easy? And then the data is so impactful, and there's so much data. They're like, wow, look at this data, because they've never seen or experienced this type of data.
Yeah.
They usually do refill counts or e-diaries to say, yeah, I took it. These sort of subjective uh, forms of measurement.
Mhm.
But our solutions are objective, and the platform provides analytics to show and prioritize patients who really need help the most,
That's
right?
amazing.
Because if you're doing well, do you really want to be bothered? Probably not. You just want to get through the clinical trial and feel better, and but if patients are really not doing well, that's where that extra reach is really helpful. and important.
That is incredible. I love that that is, still at the forefront when it comes to that. And I also like that with what you do, it's all just sensor driven and there's no patient input. I think that is so, it's like a small detail that sounds small, but I mean, is so huge when it comes to just, habits. So I think that makes things a lot easier, which is incredible. So I could just imagine with all that you've seen, all of the data, the trends, just with your wealth of experience, are there any insights that you've seen when it comes to medication adherence or non-adherence? Like what trends are you seeing within this space? Are there particular specialties or areas that, struggle maybe more than others? Just so curious.
Yeah, so, pain and anesthesiology are the most expensive trials, according to certain stats, right? All stats have a little bit of variability.
Mhm.
And when it comes to pain, right? Pain is something that is obviously per the person, right? It's to track what we have seen in the real world evidence of some of those studies is really quite alarming to some of the research teams, because they really do try to really give the benefit of the doubt to the patient, right? But when a patient is dealing with pain and anxiety, they're not in their right frame of mind and they're not thinking as they should be. So if you can have insight to say, you know what, I dispensed 30 pain pills to this patient, but I see that they only needed 6 for this type of, let's say, surgery or this type of research treatment. And then, so what happens is, from that insight, we can see as dispensing pharmacists that, wow, okay, so 30 might be too many. So let's try to reduce this, because the evidence is showing that in this particular area, we really only need maybe 10. And then that's going to reduce a lot of potential problems for diversion, where it has happened where there on the weekends we see more pills being removed, unfortunately, than during the week.
Mm.
That leads to assumptions, and typically assumptions can, work. And you can also see that if there's a benefit of, taking your medicine too quickly, right, which leads to addiction. So shortening the intradose level is very key, which we also see in pain management.
Mm.
So for drug development, if you again were a sponsor, and you have a new drug that is being, running through a clinical trial, we did see evidence that 40% of the patient population for that trial literally took all of their medicine and pushed out every pill. And who knows what they did with that? They could have put it in a Ziploc bag. They could have put it wherever. So the sponsor has no idea this was happening unless they used intelligent packaging and these sensor type packaging. And so what that did is demonstrated a couple of very, very, very important things to the sponsor. Was this: wow, that package, which they decided to use, was huge. It was like a woman carrying around a briefcase or a man carrying around a briefcase. That's not practical for a patient user experience, right?
Yeah.
So there was that aspect of it. But when it comes to, why do you think a sponsor would put a pill, a new drug, an investigational medicinal product into a thermoform blister to protect it? It's going to protect it from sunlight, from humidity, and when you take it out, it's going to be a potential degradation of that product, right? So there's lots of reasons and evidence that shows, wow, it can happen, and we had no idea this happened. So these sorts of things is what we do see. And again, with persistence, we see a big drop off with adherence. They just like give up. They're like, I give up.
Wow, that is so interesting. And
Yeah.
I think what I thought was like a small detail that you had mentioned where I was like, oh wow, that I didn't really think about that, is the thought behind packaging and what that means. Because I think, for those that are utilizing a lot of medications, they have their own mechanisms for being able to sort things and keep themselves on track, but they aren't, they those boxes or those, scheduled planners aren't always environmentally like protected for these pills. So that was a factor that I didn't even realize kind of went into the decision making when it comes to
Yes.
these types of drugs.
Yes. Yep.
That is fascinating. I know we're a few minutes out, so I do want to make sure we get to some questions that we have from our audience. So let me just go through the chat. So the first question is, Joanne, does your company have any solutions for those patients with repetitive ER admissions who do not take their pills?
Well, that's a great question because guess what? It typically, so people talk about cost, right? When it comes to these types of solutions, they're like, wow, it's how much is it, right? So if you look at these, repeated ER visits, etc., that cost alone should be looked at and say, hey, if this is a repetitive ER visiting, why don't we see if this patient would benefit from a smart pill bottle and our adherence analytics that'll show that perhaps the patient starts off well, but they start dropping off quickly. And as a care provider, you can reach out quickly and say, hey, Joanne, let's work on this so you don't end up back in the ER. Take this and we'll help you along, because clearly repeated visits to the ER, something's not right and they need some help. And this is the type of help, and this is a remote help that can help with a patient. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. We have a comment from the audience, but it speaks to a bigger question. So I definitely wanted to make sure that we talk to it. So we had a comment from a patient perspective, the serious negative lifestyle side effects that can come with some of these medications can cause that non-compliance. So there's almost like a cost benefit analysis for the patient, which is the less of the two evils. Do I take a medication with like these bad side effects that I don't like, or stop the medication, risk another medical problem? I think that was just more of a comment, but I'm curious kind of, this I think just speaks to general like patient behavior. Are there, just from the work that you've seen, are there any other drivers like this that can kind of cause non-compliance other than just, human error and forgetfulness?
Well, okay, so it depends on what the drug is. First of all, if it's a newly approved drug, there are unfortunately sometimes that the FDA will recall a drug dose strength based on dose strength because it goes out to the regular patient population, and the patients report that they perhaps are having serious side effects, etc. And that could be, and don't quote me, but that could be related to too strong of a dose when it was mandated and approved, right? Because again, during a clinical trial, if they're not using these objective adherence measures, there are risks of not doing the dose optimization and honing in on exactly the dose strength that perhaps should be approved with the FDA. But it's all about drug efficacy and dose optimization and objective adherence data to help so patients don't have to experience these adverse events, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that brings up a really good point about how, clinical trials, it's a very different environment than when it's just spread out to the general population. So I think that's a very good distinction.
Yeah.
Awesome. We have another question. So one of our participants, really can think that the clients can benefit from this type of a technology. What is the best process for recommending this type of technology, if that's even possible? So do you kind of work with other organizations, with clients that can utilize this technology? What's the best way of kind of getting in contact with you or the broader team about this?
Yeah, contact me directly for sure. And it is very important to, it doesn't cost a thing to ask questions and to learn more about how we can integrate and how we can collaborate. So we do many different ways, right? You can do collaboration, partnerships. We have mobile apps, we have software as service, but we can also integrate if clients already have an existing product that they use, but they want to take our data into that system. We can also work with that through APIs and all types of interoperability directions. So yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. And for the audience, Joanne's LinkedIn information is in our chat. So if you have any questions that are interested in using IMC, please be sure to reach out to her. I know we have a few minutes, so I wanted to kind of close our conversation with one of the questions that we always ask our guests here, which is, what are some lessons learned from your career or pieces of advice that you would like to share with the community? Either advice that you've just learned along the way, or maybe some advice that you were given that you want to then pass forward.
Yeah, I do have two adult children, so I'm pretty good at giving advice. Not
I love
necessarily
it.
always the best advice, but yeah. Uh, if you had have asked me when I was perhaps your age or even 20 that they're going to say, Joanne, you're going to be in healthcare and you're going to be working with scientists and all types of care teams. And I'd be like, what? I no, I'm not going to be doing that. But what happens is this, it's important to learn as you go through life and as you go through a journey in your career, or even if it's just a job, you're going to always learn something from that about your character.
Mm,
And it's those little character building blocks that will actually help you with creativity and find passion. And eventually it'll lead you to the path where you're supposed to go. So don't ever think that you're in a bit of a slumpy whatever, and you really
mm.
are learning something. So don't give up and just keep on going through and realize and think back at the end of the day, go, well, okay, that didn't work out too well. But you know what? I really liked it when somebody said, maybe speak this way instead of saying, telling someone, say, ask someone. These
Mhm.
little types of communication, and they help build you as a better person. And that's what is worth sharing, is a good character and a good person to meet other people and bring them up in life.
I absolutely love that. I love how you really talk about just, kind of coming at things from a place of reflection, like always be thinking and reflecting internally about, what you can learn from an experience. I think that's such a great approach to just life in general. So wanted to thank you so much, Joanne, for taking the time to chat with us today. It was a very lovely and insightful conversation. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nina. I really enjoyed myself, and I hope I was able to teach something and let everyone know that there are great solutions out there. We just gotta do it all together.
Absolutely. I love it. Awesome.
Okay, take care.
Thank you. Thanks, Joanne. All
Bye.
right, great. Bye, everyone. Just wanted to let everyone know that next week we have our another Women's Health Tech Wednesday, so please be sure to check that out. The registration information is in the chat. We also have our Digital Health Symposium at the end of this month, and all of that registration information is in the chat. We have slowly started to release our digital health podcast. We have another podcast episode that's being released today. Wanted to thank our sponsors, Goodwin and Witham, for sponsoring this conversation, as well as our guest. And with that, I will see you all next Wednesday. Bye, everyone.